I still remember the exact moment we didn't fight. That's what makes it strange, because I thought the end would be loud. I thought it would come with slammed doors, shaking hands, words we could never take back. But the day we chose ourselves, we spoke like two people who already knew the truth and were just finally brave enough to say it out loud. It was an ordinary day, the kind that should have meant nothing. A normal afternoon light slipping through the window. 2 cups on the table, one already cold. Your keys where you always left them. My sweater folded the way you liked it. Everything looked the same. And somehow, that was the first sign. Because the world didn't change. Only we did. We had been almost okay for a long time. Not broken, not angry, not cruel, just quietly tired. Tired of trying to translate silence into comfort. Tired of pretending distance was just a phase. Tired of telling ourselves that love was supposed to feel like effort. We didn't fall out of love overnight. We didn't become strangers. We just started losing pieces of ourselves. One polite compromise at a time. At first, it didn't feel dangerous. It felt mature, like the kind of love people respect, the kind that doesn't need drama to prove it's real. We learned how to be considerate, how to keep the peace, how to apologize quickly, even when we weren't sure what we were apologizing for. We became experts at fine. How was your day? Fine. Are you okay? Fine. Do you want to talk? It's nothing. And I didn't realize how heavy fine was until it was all we had left. The truth is, we still loved each other. That's the part people don't understand. We still cared. We still remembered each other's favorite foods, still shared little jokes, still touched each other's shoulder in passing. But love, without alignment, becomes a quiet kind of pain. Like carrying something beautiful in your hands, while slowly realizing there's nowhere safe to put it down. I used to think love was enough, that if 2 people loved each other deeply, everything else would figure itself out. But love doesn't fix what we refuse to name. Love doesn't automatically teach you how to choose yourself. And sometimes, love is exactly what keeps you stuck. Because you keep waiting for the old version of you to come back. And you keep hoping the other person will become who you need. And you keep trying, softly, gently, to make the relationship work, while ignoring the part of you that is quietly disappearing. I didn't notice at first how small I had become, how I started shaping my words to avoid your exhaustion, how I stopped bringing up things that mattered to me because I didn't want to add stress. How I started saying it's okay when it wasn't. Not because you forced me, but because I loved you. Because I wanted peace. Because I thought that was what love looked like. Two people making room for each other. But I didn't realize I was the only one shrinking. And I don't blame you for that. Not fully. Because you were shrinking too. In your own way. You were carrying responsibilities that didn't belong to you. Trying to be everything strong, stable, calm, and slowly forgetting what you actually wanted. We were both doing it. We were both trying to be good to each other. And that's why it hurt. Because we weren't failing at love. We were failing at ourselves. There were signs, of course. Quiet ones. The way we stopped dreaming out loud. The way our conversations became logistics. The way laughter started to sound like relief, not joy. The way you'd reach for your phone in silence, and I'd pretend it didn't sting. The way I'd come home with good news and hesitate before telling you, because I wasn't sure if you had space to celebrate me anymore. And the way you'd look at me sometimes, like you were searching for something, like you missed me, even while I was standing right there. We weren't unhappy all the time. We still had beautiful moments. That's what kept us believing. A good weekend, a long hug, a shared meal with music playing low, a night where we fell asleep facing each other and it felt like old times. But then morning would come, and we'd return to the shape of us that didn't fit anymore. And we kept calling it normal. We kept calling it life. We kept telling ourselves, this is what adulthood does to love. But deep down I knew this wasn't just life. This was loss. Slow, unspoken, disguised as routine. We didn't have one big fight. We had 1,000 small abandonments. You stopped asking. I stopped answering. You stopped reaching. I stopped expecting. And the saddest part is, we were still kind. We were still respectful. We were still careful. We loved each other enough to not hurt each other loudly. So instead, we hurt quietly. And quiet pain can last forever if nobody names it. The day it happened, the day we chose ourselves, started like any other. I remember you standing in the kitchen, your back to me, your shoulders slightly tense like they had been for months. I remember the sound of the sink running, the small clink of a spoon against a mug. I remember how I watched you and felt love, and also felt something else, something heavier. A question that had been living in my chest for a long time. Are we still here? Or are we just not leaving? I didn't plan to say anything. I didn't wake up thinking, today is the day we end it. But sometimes the truth doesn't arrive as a decision. Sometimes it arrives as a moment where you cannot pretend anymore. You turned around, and you looked at me with that careful expression you had mastered. The one that meant, I'm about to say something, but I don't know how to say it without breaking us. And I remember thinking, please don't be gentle, B. Because gentle was what kept us trapped. Gentle was the language we used to avoid the real conversation. So I spoke first, not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. I said, I feel like I'm losing myself. And you didn't argue. You didn't deny it. You just closed your eyes for a second, like you had been holding your breath for too long. And then you said something that made my throat tighten. You said, I think I'm losing you, and I don't even know how to stop it. That's the thing people don't tell you about endings. Sometimes both people see it. Sometimes both people feel it. Sometimes both people are tired of fighting a current that keeps pulling them apart. We sat down at the table, the same table where we had celebrated birthdays, made plans, held hands in the beginning, and for a while, neither of us spoke. Not because we didn't have words, but because we had too many. We had an entire history pressing against the silence. Then you asked, quietly, do you still love me? And I hate how fast my eyes filled. Because yes, I did. I still loved you in the way you made coffee without asking, in the way you remembered my family's names, in the way you held me when I was sick and didn't make it feel like a burden. I still loved you in all the places love had lived between us. But love wasn't the question anymore. So I answered the truth. I said, I do, but I don't feel like I belong in this anymore. And you nodded, like something inside you finally stopped resisting. You said, I don't want us to become resentful. And I swallowed, because I knew what you meant. We weren't resentful yet, but we were headed there. And maybe the most loving thing we could do was not wait until we hated each other to admit it wasn't working. We started talking the way we should have been talking for months. Not about who was wrong, not about who didn't try enough, not about blame, but about truth. You told me you felt pressure to be someone you couldn't keep being, that you felt guilty for needing space, that you felt like you couldn't breathe without disappointing someone. I told you I felt lonely even when you were beside me, that I missed being seen, that I missed the version of me who used to speak without fear. We said things we had been hiding under the blanket of fine. And the more we spoke, the clearer it became. We weren't enemies. We were two people who had outgrown the shape of us. It's hard to explain that kind of ending, because it doesn't feel like betrayal. It feels like grief. Grief for something that was real, something that mattered, something that was beautiful, and still wasn't enough to hold us. At one point, you reached across the table and held my hand, the same way you used to. And for a second, I almost cracked, because my body recognized you like home, and my heart wanted to choose comfort, to say, let's try again, to cling to the familiar, to keep the story going just because the ending hurt. But then I felt it, the quiet truth under my ribs. If we stayed, we would keep losing ourselves. And one day, we wouldn't recognize the people we became. So, I held your hand back, and I said softly, I think we should let each other go while we still care. Your jaw tightened, not in anger, in pain. And you whispered, I don't want to be the reason you disappear. That sentence was love. Not the romantic kind, not the movie kind, the grown kind, the kind that looks at someone and chooses their well-being over your own desire to keep them. I remember how the room felt like it had less air, how my chest hurt, like it was physically trying to hold us together. How I wanted to rewind time to a night when we were laughing in bed and everything felt simple. But life doesn't let you rewind. It only asks one thing. Are you brave enough to face what's true? We sat there, hand in hand, and we talked about what would happen next. Not the dramatic details, just the reality. Where we would go, how we would split things, what we would tell people. We spoke like adults, and it was heartbreaking, because the more practical we became, the more real it became. At some point, we stopped talking, and you stood up and walked toward me, and I stood too, and we hugged. Not the quick kind, not the casual kind, the kind where you hold someone like you're trying to memorize them, the kind where your arms tighten because your body is begging for one more chance. I buried my face in your shoulder and I could smell your soap. And I cried. Not because you were cruel, not because you failed me, but because love was still there and we were still letting go. You whispered, I'm sorry. And I whispered back, me too. We stood like that for a long time, and then, slowly, we pulled apart, and I looked at you and saw everything we had been. The beginning, the sweetness, the late-night talks, The way you used to look at me like I was the only thing in the room. And I saw the present too. The exhaustion, the distance, the version of us that was becoming survival instead of love. And I realized something I never wanted to admit. Sometimes the most painful ending is the one that happens while you still care. Because you can't hate your way out of it. You can't blame your way out. You have to grieve honestly. You have to mourn what was good. And still leave. That night, you slept on the couch. Not because we were angry, but because we didn't know how to share a bed anymore without pretending. I lay in the bedroom and stared at the ceiling, and I kept thinking about the phrase, choosing ourselves. I used to think it sounded selfish, like a modern excuse. But that night, it felt different. It felt like survival. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't choosing comfort. I was choosing truth. And choosing truth comes with a price. The next morning, you made coffee. Of course you did. Habit is stubborn. You handed me a cup without looking at me too long because your eyes were already red. I wrapped my hands around the warmth and tried to hold steady. We didn't talk much. Not because there was nothing to say, but because we had already said the main thing. The rest was just walking through the aftermath. You started packing a bag, and I sat on the edge of the bed watching you fold shirts as if this was just another trip. And I realized how absurd it is, how endings look so ordinary. No special lighting, no soundtrack, just a person folding their life into a suitcase. At one point, you paused and held up a hoodie, the one I used to steal, the one that smelled like you. You looked at it like it was a question, and then you placed it gently on my side of the bed. A silent offering, a small kindness, and that nearly broke me, because it reminded me we could have stayed kind forever. We could have lived like roommates who still hugged sometimes. We could have called it love and survived. But survival is not the same as living. I walked you to the door. The hallway felt too narrow. The world felt too normal. You put your hand on the handle and hesitated. And then you turned around. We looked at each other like two people standing on the edge of something irreversible. You said, "Do you think we'll regret this?" And I took a breath. Because that's the question people ask when they don't want to leave. When they want certainty before they choose themselves. But certainty doesn't come first. It comes later. So I answered the best truth I had. I said, "I think we'll miss each other. I think we'll hurt. But I don't think we'll regret not losing ourselves completely." You nodded slowly, like your heart understood even if it didn't want to. Then you leaned in and kissed my forehead. A soft, careful kiss. Not the kind that starts something, the kind that ends it gently. And you whispered, "Take care of you." And I whispered back, "You too." Then you opened the door and you left. And the sound of the door closing was the loudest thing I had heard in months. After you left, the apartment felt wrong, too quiet, too still. I walked through each room like I was searching for something I lost. A cup on the counter, a hair tie, a book you never finished. Evidence, proof that it was real. I sat down on the floor and cried until my throat hurt. Not in a dramatic way, in a private way. The kind of crying that feels like your body is finally letting go of a weight it carried too long. Over the next few days, people asked questions. Friends noticed. Some people tried to find the villain. They wanted a reason. They wanted a mistake. They wanted a story that made sense. But I didn't have one. I didn't leave because you were bad. You didn't leave because I was wrong. We left because we were becoming smaller versions of ourselves. And we loved each other enough to not let that be the ending. That kind of ending doesn't fit into simple explanations. It doesn't make for a clean narrative. It's messy, because the love is still there, because the memories are still warm, because the respect remains. And that's why it takes longer to heal. I kept replaying our life together, not the fights, the good parts, the way you used to reach for my hand crossing the street, the way I'd catch you humming when you thought no one was listening, the way we once talked about the future like it was a place we were both going. Those memories didn't disappear just because we ended. They stayed. And for a while, that felt cruel. Like my heart was keeping souvenirs from a home I couldn't return to. But slowly, I started to understand something else. Those memories were not traps. They were proof. Proof that love existed. Proof that we were capable of being gentle, loyal, devoted. Proof that we didn't imagine it. And one day, I realized I didn't need the relationship to validate the love. The love was real even if it didn't last. And the ending didn't erase that. Weeks passed, then months. The ache changed shape. At first, it was sharp. Then it became a quiet heaviness. Then it became something I could carry without collapsing. I learned how to sit alone without reaching for my phone, hoping you would text. I learned how to walk into my own life without turning around. I learned how to ask myself questions I had avoided for too long. What do I want? What do I need? What parts of me did I abandon just to keep love? And I won't pretend it was beautiful. It was lonely. Choosing yourself can feel like exile at first, because you're stepping away from the comfort of being chosen by someone else. You're stepping into the responsibility of choosing you every day without applause. But slowly, I started to return to myself. I started speaking more freely. I started laughing without checking if someone else was tired. I started making decisions based on my truth, not based on what kept the peace. And I realized something that made me cry again, but in a different way. I had missed me, and maybe you missed you too, because the day we chose ourselves was not just an ending, it was a beginning. Not the romantic kind, the personal kind. The kind where you stop asking love to be your entire identity and start building a life that can hold you with or without someone else. One day, much later, I ran into you, not in a movie moment, just randomly. A grocery store aisle, the kind of place where people choose fruit and pretend they're not human. I saw you first. You were standing there looking at something simple. And for a second, my body reacted before my mind did. My heart sped up. My hands went cold. Not because I wanted to run back, but because some part of me still recognized you as someone who mattered. You turned and saw me, and your face softened, not with longing, with recognition, with respect. We stood there, two people who once knew each other better than anyone, and we smiled, small, careful. You said my name, I said yours, and we talked for a minute about nothing important, how life was, how work was, how time had moved. And what struck me most was this: you looked more like yourself. Your eyes were lighter, your shoulders less tense. You were still you, but less trapped. And I realized maybe choosing yourself had saved you too. Before we parted, you said, "I'm glad you're doing okay." And I meant it when I said, "Me too." And I'm glad you are too. We didn't hug. We didn't reach back. We didn't open old doors. We just let it be what it was. A gentle proof that our ending didn't have to become bitterness, that we could be a chapter and not a wound, that we could love each other once and still choose ourselves. After you walked away, I stood there for a moment with a strange calm in my chest, because I understood something I couldn't have understood on the day you left. The day we chose ourselves was not the day love died. It was the day love changed form. Love stopped being a place we lived in together. and became something we carried quietly as a part of who we were, a lesson, a softness, a reminder that love isn't only about holding on. Sometimes love is the courage to let go with kindness. Sometimes love is saying, I won't make you stay in a life that costs you your soul. Sometimes love is choosing the version of you that can breathe. If you're listening to this and you're in that place, that quiet place, where nothing is wrong, but you feel yourself fading, I want you to know you're not selfish for wanting to come back to you. You're not a bad person for needing more than fine. You're not ungrateful for admitting love alone doesn't fix everything. Because the truth is, you can love someone and still not be right for each other anymore. And that doesn't make the love fake. It makes it human. It makes it real. The day we chose ourselves was painful, but it was also honest. And honesty, even when it hurts, is a kind of mercy. I still think of you sometimes. Not with regret, not with longing that destroys me, just softly, like a song I once loved that I don't play anymore, but still remember by heart, because you were part of my story, and I was part of yours. And even though we didn't last, we ended with something rare: respect, gentleness, a love that didn't need to become poison to prove it mattered. So if you ever wonder whether choosing yourself is worth it, I hope you remember this. The day we chose ourselves was the day we stopped abandoning who we were just to keep a relationship alive. And that choice, that brave, quiet choice, is sometimes the most loving thing you will ever do. Not just for the other person, but for you. And if no one has told you yet, you deserve to be whole. You deserve to be seen. You deserve a love that doesn't require you to disappear. Sometimes, the best ending is the one that returns you to yourself. And that's why, even though it hurt, I will always call that day the day we chose ourselves, a kind of peace,